The studio was buzzing. People laughed, clapped, and stared at the stage where late-night magic was supposed to happen. The cameras were live. The lights were perfect. Everything looked like a normal episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. Then Harrison. Ford walked in, the crowd cheered loud, rising to their feet. He gave a small wave, but there was something off. His face looked calm, but his eyes were cold. He sat down across from Kimmel with a forced smile and crossed his arms. Jimmy greeted him like an old friend. "Harrison Ford, ladies and gentlemen, a legend." The crowd applauded again. Harrison nodded, but didn't say much. Jimmy began. "With jokes, like always. So, Harrison, you're still flying those planes? How many close calls now? 10. The crowd chuckled. Harrison didn't. Still playing the tough guy, huh? Jimmy grinned. Indiana Jones with a cane next. A few more laughs. Harrison leaned forward, expression flat. "You done with the age jokes?" Jimmy looked slightly surprised. He laughed again, this time a bit nervous. "Oh, come on. We love you. You're timeless, man." Then he changed the topic. "So, this new film you're doing, Shadow Report, is intense. Cold War spies, buried files. It almost reads like real history. Some of those operations, those missions, didn't you have some connection to similar stuff back in the day?" Silence. Harrison's jaw moved slightly. "What do you mean?" Jimmy tapped his card. "There's this rumor, I'm not saying it's true, but I saw an old declassified file. Codename Echo 7. Same name as your character in the film. It's a weird coincidence, right?" For the first time, Harrison's expression changed. He sat back slowly. He didn't blink. "That file is 30 years old," he said softly. Jimmy leaned in. "So it's real. Was Echo 7 a real thing?" "You know, it's classified," Harrison said. The audience gave a confused laugh. "Was this a bit?" Jimmy smirked, pushing. "Come on, spill it." "The world wants to know if Han Solo really worked for the CIA." Another wave of laughter. Hands were clenched now. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You think this is funny?" The room went quiet. Jimmy froze, unsure whether to laugh or not. "Look, I'm just playing around, man." "No," Ford said. "You're doing exactly what they sent you here to do." "Who's they?" Jimmy tried to smile again. "You don't even know," Ford said. "You're just reading the lines." Behind the cameras, producers were on alert. Something wasn't right. A signal was flashed. "Cut to commercial." "Not yet." Ford reached up, pulled off his mic. "You want to joke about planes and files? You want to pretend you know what Echo 7 means? You want to make this all into a skit?" Jimmy was frozen now. He looked to the crew for help. Harrison stood. He turned to the audience. The camera's still rolling. "You wanted a story? You just got one." And then, as he stepped off stage, he said something quiet but clear. The boom mic caught it just before the feed cut. "It's still classified, Jimmy, and it's still active." The screen went black. The commercial played, but the internet had already exploded. Clips of Harrison's stare, his words, his strange behavior. Everything was online in minutes. Millions watched it again and again. Some laughed. Some called it a meltdown. Some said it was all scripted. But in a dark control room 2,000 miles away, someone hit pause. A man in a gray suit replayed Harrison's final words. He typed them into a program. The phrase triggered a forgotten protocol from the Cold War. A warning signal. Echo 7 active. Status breached. In another country, an old phone began to ring, a phone that hadn't rung since 1984. Inside Langley, CIA analyst named Eva Roca stared at her screen. "What is this?" she asked her supervisor. He didn't answer. Across Hollywood, another man, the producer who had booked Harrison for the show, was deleting files, burning papers, pulling SIM cards. He wasn't laughing. Back on Kimmel's stage, the next guest sat down, but the host was rattled. He barely looked at the camera. "You know, sometimes things get weird," he said. "Let's just keep going." But the audience wasn't. Clapping somewhere backstage, Ford had already left the building. He didn't take the car arranged by the studio. He walked 3 blocks alone, then climbed into a black sedan waiting near an alley. He didn't say a word to the driver. He just looked out the window and whispered to himself. They heard it. The car pulled away. No one knew yet what the phrase meant. But some people remembered, and those people were very afraid. News. Outlets ran headline after headline. Harrison Ford storms off set. Actor drops code-like statement on air. Echo 7. Real or scripted? But while fans and gossip bloggers filled the internet with reaction videos, a very different conversation was happening inside a locked room at CIA headquarters in Langley. 4 men and 1 woman sat in front of a wall of screens. The oldest of them, Director Collins, had served through the Cold War. His face was pale. "I never thought we'd hear it again," he said, staring at the transcript on the monitor. "It's still classified, Jimmy, and it's still active." The computer had picked it up instantly. The phrase wasn't just odd dit, was part of an old internal alert protocol used in deep cover operations. It was only ever meant to be spoken if a field asset believed a long-terminated mission was still ongoing or compromised. The phrase had been buried in the archives, forgotten, until now. The woman, Eva Roca, reviewed the database. CO7. Confirmed originally a Black Ops surveillance cell active from 1973 to 1982. Codenames were erased in '89, except one. She turned the screen. Harrison Ford's face appeared. Collins exhaled slowly. "It wasn't just a role," Eva said. "He didn't play Echo 7. He was it." In Los Angeles, the producer who booked Harrison Ford, Mark Leavitt, had gone. Silent. He hadn't answered his phone since the previous night. His apartment was empty. His office had been cleared. Surveillance footage from the studio showed him leaving before the show aired. In Washington, an encrypted signal hit a private Russian network in St. Petersburg. It was traced back to a relay once used by Soviet counterintelligence. In Berlin, a former KGB officer who now lived under a new name threw his phone into the Spree River. Something had been triggered and it wasn't a joke anymore. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel kept quiet. His team released a carefully written statement. Last night's interview with Harrison Ford was intense but unscripted. "We respect Mr. Ford and wish him the best." But internally, Jimmy was panicking. He knew what he said on air. He remembered the name Echo 7 because it had come from an anonymous source 2 days earlier. Man who sent a single-page document to Jimmy's team marked for segment use only. Jimmy thought it was a PR stunt from the film's marketing team. Now he wasn't so sure. And there was something else bothering him. Harrison's stare. That moment, right before he left the way, he looked at Jimmy. Not like a guest looking at a host. Like a soldier looking at a target. But Jimmy didn't sleep. That night, by noon, agents were at the studio reviewing the footage. They requested the raw Fedevri camera angle, every backstage mic, even the green room hallway footage. "What are we looking for?" the tech asked. "Anything he left behind," the agent replied. Words, gestures, signals. This wasn't just about walking off stage, it was a message. Back in Langley, Eva watched the footage again, and again she slowed the audio. At exactly 9:23 p.m., just as Harrison Ford stood up, he tapped his mic twice, then scratched the back of his left ear. Twice, then once. It was the old distress pattern used in East Berlin, a signal to a handler. "I am compromised. Initiating fallback protocol." That meant he had backup. That meant someone else was out there. Eva dug deeper. The original Echo 7 operation had involved 3 field assets and 1 civilian coordinator, codebreaker embedded in media networks, tasked with storing activation data in case a buried op ever needed to be revived. The file didn't list a name, only a location, Hollywood, CA. By 2 p.m., Eva was on a flight west. Meanwhile, Harrison Ford hadn't gone home. A day had passed and he hadn't contacted his family or his publicist. No interviews, no apologies, just ... silence. But someone had seen him. At 5:42 a.m., traffic cams spotted him entering a maintenance tunnel near the LA River. 2 hours later, a local power outage struck a half-mile radius in the same area. Security cameras went offline. Ford was underground. Why? Because something had been buried there 40 years ago. It was time to dig it up. Inside a small concrete tunnel beneath the Los Angeles River, the air was cold and damp. Old pipes lined the ceiling. The place smelled like rust, dirt, and secrets. Harrison Ford stood still, holding a flashlight. His clothes were soaked from the morning rain, but his hands didn't shake. He had been here before, not recently, but once, a long time ago. In 1984, this tunnel had been part of a hidden Cold War relay system, a dead-drop location. Back then, he wasn't an actor on stage. He was Agent Echo 7N, American embedded inside film production circles to observe cultural propaganda and foreign interference. Everyone thought the mission was over. He knew better. 30 feet into the tunnel, Ford reached a corner. There, under a broken panel, he uncovered a metal box sealed with wax and rust. He pried it open with a tool from his pocket. Inside was a small cassette tape, 2 photos, and a folded envelope with his initials. He took them all, sealed the panel again, and walked deeper into the darkness. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles International Airport, CIA analyst Eva Roca stepped out of a black SUV. A man in a suit greeted her with a folder. Ford accessed this tunnel at 5:40 a.m. No cameras inside. But he triggered a proximity sensor, one of ours. Eva opened the folder. We need to find out what he pulled. He's not working alone, the agent said. 2 minutes. After he entered the tunnel, another phone pinged nearby. Guess who? He handed her a photo. Mark Leavitt, the producer who had vanished. Eva narrowed her eyes. So the booking wasn't random. It was planned. It's the whole thing. Back in Hollywood, Jimmy Kimmel was in his office, pale and sweating. 2 government agents had interviewed him for over an hour. They asked strange questions. Did you know Harrison before the show? Who gave you the Echo 7 script? Did anyone approach you about military files? He didn't have answers. But there was one thing he remembered. 2 nights before the show, an unmarked envelope had been slid under his dressing room door. Inside was an old black and white photo of a much younger Harrison Ford standing next to a man in uniform. No name, no date, just a single handwritten line he never left. Now Jimmy wondered if that wasn't a threat, but a warning. Elsewhere, a black SUV sped through Los Angeles. Inside it, Mark Leavitt was silent. Next to him, in the back seat, sat Harrison Ford. Mark drove without, using GPS. No phones, no trace. We're running out of time, Ford said. They activated the protocol when you spoke, Mark replied. They'll come for both of us. Ford opened the envelope from the tunnel. Inside was a hand-drawn map and a list of coordinates. It's still there, he said. We buried the evidence. It was never destroyed. Mark looked in the rearview mirror. If we take it public, we'll both be dead by morning. No, Ford said. Not if the right people see it first. Mark sighed, and who decides who's right? Ford didn't answer. In a hotel room across town, Eva laid out photos, papers, and video stills across a table. She played the broadcast footage again. At the exact moment Ford said, "It's still classified, Jemmy." A flash of red appeared behind him, a light. On a backstage panel, she zoomed in. The pattern matched an old encryption key once used by a Soviet mole inside the U.S. Senate in 1983. This isn't random, Cho said aloud. It's a chain. Just then, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was tight. We picked up a signal from an old Cold War broadcast station in New Mexico. Someone's trying to activate the back channel. Eva froze. It's impossible. It was shut down decades ago. No, it was only sleeping. By midnight, satellite footage spotted a vehicle near the edge of Death Valley heading toward an old decommissioned military station buried under the desert. License plate registered to Harrison Ford's estate. Eva got up. "Send me everything. I'm going after him." Back on the road, Mark and Harrison drove in silence. Then Mark asked something he'd been holding back for years. "Why did you keep it secret all this time? You could have exposed the operation back in the 90s. Ford looked out the window. "'Cause no one would have believed it," he said. "And because back then, the people who tried ... disappeared." Mark asked the final question. "And what about now?" Ford turned toward him. "Oh, they're already watching." A thin wind cut across the sand, pushing dust into the air as the black SUV rolled to a stop near a fence marked "Property of U.S. Air Force Restricted Area." The sign was old, rusted. The fencing itself had gaps. In the wire, it hadn't been maintained in decades. But Harrison Ford remembered exactly where to go. "This is where it ended," he said quietly, "and where it begins again." Mark Leavitt followed him past the fence and across a stretch of flat rock. Beneath their feet, buried inside the sand, was a concrete hatch. No number, no handle, just a circle of metal and a lock coded to a dead protocol. Ford knelt beside it and entered 6 digits on a small panel he uncovered with his sleeve. There was a soft click. "How did you remember the code?" Mark asked. Ford didn't answer. The truth was, he had never forgotten it. The hatch opened slowly with a groan. Cool air poured out. Below them, a stairwell led deep into the earth. Inside the hidden structure, the halls were lined with thick metal doors and flickering lights that hadn't been touched in over 30 years. The entire facility had been sealed since 1986. Officially, it didn't exist. Ford and Mark walked down the corridor until they reached a reinforced vault door marked Section Echo. Ford typed the code again. This time, a louder click echoed through the silence and the door swung open. Inside was a small, dark room with a single table. On the table sat a locked briefcase. Ford opened it slowly. Inside were old photos, tape reels, and documents stamped "Eyes Only Operation Nightflow." There were transcripts of intercepted communications, names of political figures in both U.S. and Soviet camps, many of them still alive. There was proof that a deep surveillance network had been embedded in American media and government circles. And Ford had been part of the team that uncovered it. But something was wrong. "There's one folder missing," Ford said, scanning the contents. Mark looked confused. "What was in it?" "The key," Ford said. "The decoder for the intercepts." He paused, then clenched his jaw. Kimmel had it back in Los Angeles. Eva Roca stood in Jimmy Kimmel's studio dressing room, now locked down by government agents. She replayed the footage of the night Ford walked off, over and over again. Then she noticed something strange. Just before the broadcast ended, a red envelope was slid beneath Kimmel's desk. It wasn't seen on the main camera, but in the side feed it was clear. Eva pulled the still image. On the envelope, in black marker, Echo Core. She knew then Jimmy Kimmel had been used. He wasn't just a target. He was a relay. Moments later, her phone buzzed. A private text, anonymous. "If you want the truth, come alone. 34.963 ON, 116.9670 W." That was near Barstow, near the old station Ford had just entered. She grabbed her bag and left, alone. Hours passed. Back underground, Ford sat beside a radio console. He turned it on. Static crackled. Then a faint voice played Baca, recording looped in intervals. "We weren't meant to live in the light. Kay trained us for shadows." It was his own voice. A message he had recorded in 1985 as a warning to future handlers. Then something else came through. A signal low, encrypted, repeating 3 letters, KR. Ford's eyes widened. "That's not possible," he whispered. "She's still alive." Mark looked over. "Who?" Ford swallowed hard. Catherine R. Feller. She was the codebreaker. She vanished in 87. What does that mean? Mark asked. Ford stood. It means this wasn't about me. This whole thing, Jemmy, the show, the broadcast it, was designed to pull her out of hiding. Mark's voice dropped. So, we're the bait. No, Ford said. We're the spark. Above ground, miles away, Ava's SUV approached the coordinates from the text. As she stepped out, a woman in a gray coat appeared from behind a rock. Oldersharpeyed.com. You found me, the woman said. Who are you? Eva asked. The woman smiled. My name is Catherine Feller. And I was Harrison Ford's last handler. Eva Roca stared at the woman in front of her, unsure if what she was hearing was real. You're Catherine Feller, she asked slowly. The woman gave a small nod. Her eyes didn't blink. And I've been waiting for someone like you to find me. They stood in silence under the desert sky. The air buzzed with the kind of electricity you feel before lightning strikes. Eva had studied declassified Cold War files for years. Catherine Feller's name appeared only in redacted memos, always blacked out, always marked classified. The last known record placed her in Berlin, 1987, then nothing. She was supposed to be dead, but here she was, alive. Catherine turned, motioning for Eva to follow her. We don't have much time. They're already moving. Who? Eva asked. The same network Ford and I exposed in 85, she said. They never disbanded. They just got smarter. They walked down a dry path toward a hidden entrance beneath a ridge. Catherine unlocked a door that led to a narrow staircase. They descended into a small underground bunker lit by low emergency lights. Inside, maps and documents covered the walls. Every inch of the space had been used. An entire intelligence web was laid out: photos, names, broadcast times, political connections. Timelines dating back to the Cold War. Some faces were familiar. Senators, journalists, tech CEOs, even a few entertainers. Ava's stomach dropped. You're telling me this isn't just about Ford? This is something global. Catherine nodded. It always was. She pointed to a file in the center of the table marked Echo 7 Op-Nightflow. Inside were mission logs from the 1980s Ford's original assignment. He had been placed as a cultural observer, tasked with tracking manipulation through entertainment. It started with monitoring films, then expanded into news media and late-night television. What happened to the data? Eva asked. Catherine hesitated. It was locked inside a decoder, something only I could operate. Ford was never supposed to access it alone. But he mentioned it on Kimmel's show. Still classified? It's still active. That triggered everything. Catherine looked at her. Exactly. That phrase was a pre-coded signal. It meant he believed the system had been reactivated. Eva leaned over the table. So, what now? We intercept them, Catherine said. Whoever's trying to resurrect the operation, they'll be coming for the decoder and Ford. Back inside the decommissioned military station, Ford paced the hallway while Mark Leavitt stayed behind, scanning the old tape reels they'd found in the vault. One tape was marked with just a date, June 17, 1986. Mark played it. A grainy voice came through. This is Agent Delta 4. Target intercepted. Echo 7 compromised. Do not proceed with public exposure. Repeat. Abort Operation Nightflow. Mark froze. The voice wasn't Ford's. It was Catherine's. He rewound and played it again. The words were clear. Echo 7 compromised. Mark turned to Ford. You were betrayed. Echo shook his head. No, that message was a cover. We faked the shutdown to buy time. Mark looked doubtful. Why trust Catherine now? Ford stepped closer. Because she's the only one who knew how deep the system went. And if she's resurfacing now, it means someone even higher is pulling strings? Suddenly, a distant rumble shook the ground. An SUV kicked up dust outside the base. Two more followed. They found us, Ford said. Mark grabbed the file's exit plan. Ford pointed to a steel tunnel behind the main chamber. Emergency route 5 minutes on foot leads to the next ridge. As they ran, Mark clutched the briefcase tight. Ford glanced back. Figures in tactical gear were storming the entrance. Gunshots echoed. Dust fell from the ceiling. But Ford and Mark slipped into the tunnel just in time. Miles away, Ava's phone buzzed. A live satellite alert. "They breached Site Echo," she said aloud. Catherine nodded grimly. "They're faster than I thought. We have to reach them before extraction." Eva frowned. "It's doing the extraction." Catherine flipped a file. A name appeared. "Langley Deep Unit, Shadow Section B, unofficial," she said, "but real. It's not the CIA anymore, it's what's beneath it." Ava's hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just a Cold War ghost. It was a living, breathing operation. Catherine handed her an earpiece and started packing the bunker. "Let's move. If we don't get to Ford in time, the truth dies with him." At sunrise, Ford and Mark emerged from the tunnel onto a high ridge overlooking the Mojave Desert. They were exhausted, dirty, bruised, but alive. In the distance, they could see the black SUVs leaving the base. Ford looked east, where the sun was rising behind distant hills. Mark exhaled. "So, what's next?" Ford opened the briefcase and pulled out a small black drive. "This," he said, "goes public." Mark hesitated. "You sure?" "Once it's out, there's no going back." Ford looked straight ahead. "That's the point." They met at a gas station just outside Barstow. The sun was low. The shadows were long. A quiet tension hung in the desert air. Ford stepped out of the SUV first, dirt still on his jacket. Mark followed behind, carrying the black briefcase like it held the world's last secret. Catherine Feller and Eva Roca were already waiting, parked beside an old camper van. Catherine had her arms crossed. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, as if she knew something was already watching. Ford gave her a nod. "Didn't expect to see you again." Catherine didn't smile. "Didn't expect to be alive long enough to make it happen." Mark placed the briefcase on the hood of the car. "Got everything? Files, tapes, the drive?" Catherine didn't move. "Then you understand what happens next." Eva stepped forward. "We publish it. Release the truth." "No," Catherine said flatly. "Not yet." Eva frowned. "What do you mean?" Catherine turned to her. "If we go public now, we start a war we're not ready for. Disinformation will drown the truth in seconds. The system that built Nightflow is still running, but now it's decentralized, digital, and global." She pulled out a small device-hardened military tablet. "Okay? On it were satellite images, maps, and message intercepts. These are drop zones and coded relay sites tied to Shadow Section B. They're moving the last assets out of the country. If we release this too early, they'll vanish." Ford's voice was calm, but sharp. "Then we don't release everything. Just enough to force them into the open." Catherine paused. "You're talking about bait." Mark looked between them. "What kind of bait?" Eva answered. "A name, a face, a single piece of the puzzle. Enough to make them nervous?" Catherine nodded slowly. "Then we feed them Kimmel." That night, Jimmy Kimmel appeared live again. The show was different. No guests, no jokes. He looked tired, defensive, nervous. He opened with a statement. "Last week, something happened on this stage. Something that wasn't just about an actor walking off set. Since then, my name's been linked to conspiracy theories, hidden messages, and classified programs. I want to say clearly that I don't know anything about any of that." But his voice wavered. People noticed. Behind the scenes, Kimmel had received a call. Voice distorted, masked, told him to stay quiet. Not just about Ford, but about a file. A red envelope. Something that had been handed to him during a commercial break. Something he wasn't supposed to open. But he had. And now he was scared. After the broadcast, Jimmy was quietly escorted from the studio. Not by his usual security, but by two men in dark suits. No visible ID. Cameras didn't follow. They took him into a black van and drove into the Los Angeles night. He wouldn't be seen for 3 days. Meanwhile, in a motel room near the Nevada border, Eva uploaded a redacted version of the Echo 7 documents to a secured public archive. Not the full truth, but just enough. Within hours, media platforms picked it up. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Nightflow Files, hashtag Echo 7 leak, hashtag. Where is Kimmel? Major networks stayed silent. But independent journalists and international news outlets began asking questions. Too many details matched, too many names were real. And then the warning came. Catherine's old burner phone lit up with a single text. He knows. He's coming. Ford stared at the screen. Who's he? Catherine whispered the name like it burned her mouth. Adler. Mark leaned forward, as in Director Adler. CIA? No, Catherine said. He was never CIA. He built what came after. Ford clenched his fists. He's the one who ordered the Nightflow cover-up. And now, she said, he wants it buried for good. The next night, a private jet landed at a secluded airstrip north of San Diego. A man stepped out, tall, well-dressed, flanked by 2 operatives. Adler, he hadn't aged like the others. Rumors said he had vanished from Washington years ago, resigned, exiled, forgotten. But he had never stopped working. Inside the jet were detailed files on Ford, Catherine, Eva, and Mark. Photos, transcripts, movements. They broke protocol, Adler said, flipping through the photos. Now we bury them. He handed one of his operatives a flash drive. Upload the discredit campaign. Use every tool we have. Bots, influencers, headlines. By morning, Harrison Ford will be an unstable ex-actor with delusions of espionage. The agent nodded. And send in the cleaners. Catherine dies first. At 3 a.m., a drone buzzed low over the desert where Ford's group had camped. Catherine heard it first. She pulled her gun and shouted, "Move." A second later, an explosion lit the sky. His camper burst into flames. They had seconds to flee. The plane touched down just after midnight at a decommissioned airstrip 2 miles from Langley, Virginia. No lights, no tower, just cold wind and silence. Ford stepped onto the tarmac first, his coat flapped behind him like a shadow. Eva and Catherine followed. Each of them carried nothing but what they could hide: drives, documents, names. Faces burned into memory. This place isn't just where it ends, Ford said. It's where it started. Langley wasn't just the home of the CIA. Beneath everything was a secure facility few, even inside the agency, knew existed. It was once used to process Cold War intelligence before operations were digitized. They called it the well. Ford had visited it once as a young intelligence courier. Now, decades later, he was coming back not to deliver a message, but to release one. Catherine entered the old access code. The steel doors groaned open. Inside, concrete tunnels, motion sensors, half-live flickering lights. A corridor led to the main chamber, a sealed vault with a single working server connected to an isolated line. The one system they couldn't hack from the outside. "This is it," Eva whispered. "If we upload the full file here, there's no way to stop it." Ford nodded. "Which is why they're already coming." Miles away, Adler stood in a black operations center beneath Arlington. Surveillance feeds showed thermal signatures moving into the Langley complex. He smiled. "They're predictable." An agent handed him a tablet. Discredit campaign is live. Ford's trending hashtag Ford delusion, hashtag Kimmel truth. Media's spinning it as a publicity stunt. And Catherine. The agent hesitated. She's off grid. No comes, no signature. Adler turned away from the screen. She'll be with him. They always circle back to each other. He lifted a phone, pressed a button, and said only one word: engage. Inside the well, Eva connected the final drive. Lines of code streamed. Across the old monitor, government documents, audio logs, surveillance blueprints, budget trails, deep state asset maps, a secret architecture of political influence, psychological operations, and digital manipulation. It was all there. Eva looked at Ford. Once we hit enter, they can't stop it. Ford exhaled. Then let the people decide what's real. Press the key. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then the server fan roared to life. Data began uploading across a secured burst satellite relayered on servers in Iceland, Kenya, South Korea. Untraceable, permanent. Outside, they heard the first sound of boots. Mark peeked through the corridor. They're in. Catherine loaded her weapon. We hold them until the upload finishes. Ford turned to Eva. Go. Take the side tunnel. Get to the broadcast relay. If they shut the power here, the whole feed dies unless someone keeps it hot. Eva hesitated. I'm not. Leaving you? You're not, he said softly. You're making sure this matters. Eva ran. Gunfire echoed behind her as armed agents entered the well. Catherine took position behind the old steel mainframe. Mark found cover behind a collapsed file cabinet. Ford stood in the open, unarmed. Adler stepped through the smoke. He looked older now, harsher, but his voice was calm. You never knew how to walk away, Adler said. Ford didn't blink. You never knew when to stop. You were an actor, Harrison. It's all you ever were. We let you play hero. We used your face to bury truths. And now I'm using it to dig them up. Adler raised his hand. An agent stepped forward. Catherine fired first. The room erupted. Smoke, bullets, shouting. Mark yelled as the server sparked. We need 10 more seconds. Adler fired once Catherine fell. Ford screamed, but the drive clicked. The lights blinked green dot. Mark stood with his hands raised, eyes full of fire. It's done, he said. You can't bury it. Adler looked around. You think people care about the truth? They care about comfort. We give them noise. Forget by morning, Ford stepped forward. You're wrong. A low rumble shook the chamber. Above ground, every major news outlet's feed was being hijacked by a simple broadcast. This is not fiction. This is not a film. This is Echo 7. And this is the truth you were never meant to see. Across the world, people stopped. Phones buzzed, screens flickered. Emails surged. The Nightflow file was live, and there was no turning back. Later, in a quiet hospital room in D.C., Catherine opened her eyes. She had survived. Eva sat beside her, holding her hand. Mark stood at the window, watching the skyline as sirens echoed in the distance, half of them chasing, half of them chasing. And Ford, gone, vanished after the broadcast. Some say he disappeared into the Rockies. Others believe he was taken by one of the last loyalists in Shadow Section B. But Eva didn't care. She had seen the light in his eyes before he left. He had finished what he started. For once the truth hadn't just been spoken, it had been heard.